Hi, this is Clara, not a witch, and this is practice for Monday. So this Monday, I am supposed to go to the Chicago Ethnography Conference, and my panel is supposed to be run by none other than the Gary Alan Fine. So naturally, I picked up a copy of his book, and I think it's going to help me answer one of my key questions, which is, why do ethnography? So here is what Gary Alan Fine says in his book about chess players. The Dense World of Chess, my research home for 5 years. This guy's been 5 years writing this book. Is ideal for this purpose, but I could have selected other domains as well. Any location in which individuals and groups voluntarily gather in common commitment would suffice, especially if subgroups with different skills and varying networks overlap. My interest is not in the games themselves, but what surrounds them, in the minds and bodies of players, in their interaction, in the community, and in the interaction orders that make the community possible. My observational studies focus on one tightly knit group, not examining the existence of an intersecting sets of groups that together constitute the community. My argument is that chess worlds are, in every particular social worlds. Okay, so what he's doing is he has studied chess for 5 years, a little ridiculous, and he has a list in here of all of the events he went to in Chicago and everything else, which is where he's based. And that's what he's doing. He's looking at not just chess, which is what his book is about, but how do players build community together? And so that's I feel like that's a pretty good introduction into what is ethnography. And not nearly as interesting as the question is why people do it. And I will show you some really cool ethnographies. Ooh, they are over here. Ethnographies can answer really a lot of exciting questions. Like here's one, Christians under covers. This is juicy. This tells you, what do Christians do when they get on the internet? On the run, Alice Goffman, daughter of the famous Irving Goffman, chases people around. I think there's a gun. I don't know. Ethnographies tell us about poverty. This isn't really an ethnography, but worth a mention. Anyway, the point is ethnographies answer lots of interesting questions that extend just beyond one individual or even a group, and they tell us how do things work together to help facilitate these dynamic social processes and change. So that's all to say, ethnography is pretty cool. So I just wanted to share with you just a couple of slides here just to kind of motivate this question about, there's things that we can see with ethnography that we can't see with other methods. And so here is sort of my main case is religion and people leaving religion and joining religions and converting and switching and all these things that happen in the religious landscape. So these are two completely different slides here on the same page, but they're both using, I think they're both using panel data here, surveys where we're looking at change over time. So the one on the left here, this is from Pew. This is, Pew is a very reliable source of data about religion, and it's showing how Americans feel toward different religious groups. And so just to point this out, so this is showing change over the time. So this is looking at 2014 and 2017 responses to this survey, which is drawing on a representative sample of American adults. So, and it's showing that by and large, a lot of groups, except evangelicals, have had a change here in how people regard them. So looking at, on the left side here, looking at Jews, we can see that people feel more warmly towards Jews now than they did even a few years ago. Presuming, I guess to phrase it like that, presuming, of course, that how people felt in 2017 is similar to how they feel now, which we don't know to be the case. Evangelicals have stayed about the same. Hindus, Mormons, atheists and Muslims have all experienced pretty significant increases in the warmth with which people regard them. But I will say that, atheists are at the very bottom there next to Muslims. And that is very significant to me. People treat atheists with what might be regarded as stigma. And of course, although groups like agnostics and other groups are different than atheists make a very particular commitment. Non-religious people in other groups, other types of nuns, don't necessarily share the same commitments, but they're still treated with a level of coldness, to use Pew's feelings thermometer there. So this is from 2014 to 2017. Now looking towards the right, we have a completely different set of data, completely different chart here. This is from Howell and Fisher's work in 2002. And what Howell and Fisher show here is that there is a decrease in Americans saying that they have a particular religious preference. So what does that mean? It means, if we look at this data from the GSS, I should have pulled up their survey question. I didn't, but they asked people, what would you say is your religious preference? Are you a Christian? Are you a Jew? Are you a particular type of Protestant Christian? Are you a particular type of Catholic? Or so on and so forth. And this is just showing you that there's an increase in the people who have no religious preference beginning. There's a steep increase here in about 1990 through to 2000. Around that same time, we have a lot of people leaving mainline congregations and joining evangelical congregations. So that's just kind of interesting that overlaps. But we see this situation over here where we have an increase in people that are saying they have no religious preference, right at the same time as we have, no, not at the same time, sorry, right at the following, I would say, a trend that looks to be similar with feelings towards other religious groups, if that makes sense at all. I don't know. So I guess, and then Howell and Fisher's article is so interesting because what they're doing is they're showing with this data, they're tracing back this decline in religious preference, and they're saying, actually, we know what causes this. We know what causes this. And they point to the things that we've kind of always known. It's that, if I have to go to a different job in a different city, I might not go back to my church, right? If people go back to the church, after they've sort of left for college or whatever, if they're having children later, maybe that's because of financial insecurity. Maybe they can't find a spouse. For whatever reason, they're having their children later. So with that, we know that those are causes, but by and large, the biggest cause that Howell and Fisher's work points to for why people leave their religion, that's a why question, political polarization, changing the meaning of what it means to be part of this religious congregation. So all that to say, that's just an interesting tidbit about Howell and Fisher. But looking at people leaving their religion, it has, real consequences. And one of the consequences, and I'll point to this here, is that, so if you change your religious identity, you might go from being an evangelical, that's pretty warm on the hot-cold thermometer, right? To being, say, an atheist, that's pretty cold on the hot-cold thermometer. So it is time for my next slide here. Just for a minute, I just want to plant some ideas about religion and stigma. So an individual who might, so stigma is fundamentally relational for Goffman. An individual who might have been received easily in ordinary social intercourse possesses a trait that can obtrude itself upon attention and turn those of us whom he meets away from him, breaking the claim that his other attributes have on us. He possesses a stigma, an undesired differentness from what we had anticipated. So what Goffman's saying there is basically a stigma is something that's impeding my relationship with you. It's something that I might be overly aware of, like, if I had a different kind of nose or something. And it's something that would kind of maybe be distracting of attention towards me. And so I think in a lot of communities, right, our ideas about non-religion and non-religious identities are kind of like stigma. They are stigmatized, and so they lower our social power, etc. So if you're leaving your religion, whichever way you end up, if you express doubts, and I've heard PBK talk about this, if you express doubts in your religious community, if you want to interpret your religious texts in a different way, if you tell the wrong person that you don't like the color of the carpet, those things can be built up into something that's stigmatized. That's all. So I was also gonna tell you about Durkheim here, because who wouldn't? And I think this is something that's going to kind of underline stakes. Like, what is at stake here? Why does stigma even matter? Why do identities matter? To that question, I go to Durkheim. Here it is. I think this is one of the most important passages in sociology and anthropology is Durkheim kind of telling us, what is religion? Why does it matter? And what we get here, I'll just read. He goes through all of this wonderful, like, talking about symbols, talking about how we build up emotional energy and through religious practice. He says, religion is no longer some inexplicable hallucination and becomes rooted in reality. He's talking about when people are gathered together in religious practice, when people are deeply involved doing the actions of their religious commitments. We can say, in fact, that the worshiper is not deluding himself when he believes in the existence of a higher moral power from which he derives his best self. That power exists, and it is society. And so he's talking not only about our individual sort of religious practice, he's saying, this happens collectively when we're gathered together in these practices. We're engaging this society, and it's shaping us. And so what's happening, I guess, when we're leaving that is that many times we develop a stigmatized identity. That's all. So just some ideas there to jumpstart with some really interesting pieces and works I'm thinking with. There's quite a lot there, and I really like kind of thinking with all of these different kind of levels of thought and analysis we have. Ethnography isn't really about these individual narratives of identity, like if a journalist goes into a religious community and experiences a conversion experience, or if one person leaves a highly involved religious community, or if, even a high profile person says, I can't do this like this anymore, and deconstructs. It's all, those are all pieces of the puzzle in ethnography. And what ethnography is doing is looking at the spaces and the environment and seeing how people within a community, or communities really, are able to have these social processes. So that's what I'm thinking with. I'm really interested in kind of learning more about how and what other people are thinking about. So I guess I will just kind of leave this here. This has been a little bit of practice for Monday if I end up in Chicago talking to the one and only Gary Allen Fine. So maybe this is my boat. Maybe I could join the flotilla. I don't know. Peace to you all.